Hey everyone, welcome back. This is our fourth working session on the app I'm calling Credos. It's an activity kind of habit forming tracker to get you going from, hey, I'm not doing anything to I'm doing something, taking that first step. And we've been working on the dashboard page, and we're going to continue with that today, specifically on the best streak logic, which is a little more complicated, a little more interesting than some of the simple count type stuff that we've done before. And so I'll kind of break down how I figured that out and what I found through this. And so let's get going. So I was looking ahead of kind of what we're wanting to do today, and I was trying to figure out how to do this best streak logic. And I couldn't think of a great way to do that in Active Record, so I kind of started looking at just SQL options. And I came across this blog post on the Juke blog. I'm not sure how you say that, Jooq. Which was really great, and it was doing exactly what I needed it to. We're basically trying to find, how many days in a row for a particular attribute do we have a record existing. So, for example, if we're tracking this, how many days in a row do we have physical checked? And so, I'm going to walk through kind of what this blog post did and kind of explain how this works. Here's the query over here on the left. It might be a little intimidating if you haven't done a lot of SQL stuff, but I think if we go through it kind of step by step, it'll make a lot of sense. Okay, so there's kind of three parts here. So we have this with clause, which is giving us kind of these temporary tables. So we're kind of doing some like pre-calculation twice, and then the actual query is selecting our final result that we want. So to kind of break this down, the first thing we're doing is we're creating this table, temporary table. It's also called a CTE, a common table expression. And this table just contains the distinct days, so unique days from our records. And then we're querying based on what we want here. So we're going to take, let's say, a particular user, and we're going to take a particular attribute, say mental. And so we want to figure out how many days, or what are the distinct days that this user had completed this activity. So for example, if I run just this piece right here, hopefully I can make this text way bigger. Okay, good. So these would be the days. These would be the days that this particular user, number 4, our test seed user, has logged true for this mental attribute. And so we can see that it's the 3rd, the 4th, the 6th, the 7th, and the 8th. So there's a gap in here. We're missing the 5th, which makes this good to test on because we want it. So we've got a 2-day streak here. We've got the 3rd and the 4th. And then we've got a 3-day streak here. We're skipping the 5th, and then the 6th, 7th, and 8th. So that's what this returns. We've just got all the days that this activity happened. Okay, so this next part is where some of the more complicated stuff happens. So we're taking all these days, and then what we want to do, let's just read through this real quick and then explain it. So we are selecting from the days the row number. So this row number function returns, like it says, the number of the row of the result. So for example, like if we're doing these right here, this would be 9-3 would be row 1, row 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. We're ordering by the date, so we're just going to put them in date ascending order. So we're going to take this date, and we're going to subtract the row number, but we're going to make the row number into a day, and that's what this times interval 1 day is doing. So basically, we're going to take the day, and we're going to subtract it by the number of days that is the row number. And we'll look at that here in a second. That'll make more sense. And then we're also just selecting the date again. So if I just run these first 2 pieces, so let's just do select, start from dates. So let's just kind of like break out these first 2 pieces and run those. And I'll put a link to this blog post in the description as well. Oh, I don't want dates, I want groups. So this table is called groups. So go ahead and run this. And so we're going to see here, this first column is the row number. This second one is the group that we made. And then the third one is our original date. So where the kind of the magic of this comes in is, well, let me swap these because it'll make it a little easier to understand. No, I'm missing a comma. Okay, so first column we have the row number. So this is just if you ordered this result set, here are the numbers. So the first row has 1, second row has 2. We have the date of the activity in the second column. And then the third one is the group that we formed. And so the way we form this group is kind of interesting, and this is what makes this work. So this line right here, we're taking the date minus the row number as a date. So we're taking the date, 9-3. Well, let me just order these again. Let's put them in the order that the calculation is happening. Okay, so we've got the date, the row number, and then the group that we made. And so here's how we're making the group. We take the date minus the row number as a date. So let's go through it for this first one. So we have 9-3 minus 1 as a day. So 9-3 minus 1 day is 9-2. That makes sense? Second row, 9-4 minus 2 days is 9-2. Now when we go to 9-6, when we do 9-6 minus 3 is 3, 9-7 minus 4 is 3, 9-8 minus 5 is 3. And so what this ends up doing is that every day you stay consistent, you end up with the same day. So 3 minus 1 is 2, 4 minus 2 is 2. Here we skipped the 5th day, so now it becomes 6 minus 3 is 3, 7 minus 4 is 3. So every time you stay consistent, the day minus the row number has the same value. So here it's basically 2 and 2, and then 3, 3, and 3. And so that's what's letting us group these together and find these streaks. So I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, leave me a comment or something, and we can talk about it more. So this is how we're forming the groups. We're saying that the difference between these things is making this natural grouping for us. So we have the second and the third. So now that we have these groups, the last thing we're going to do is we're going to take the count of the rows, we're going to take the minimum day and the max day from this group. So we're grouping by group, which is, these could probably be named a little better. So the group here is this date calculation that we're doing. And then we're ordering by the count of how many there are, descending, and then by the date that it started. So let's just run this and then talk about that more. So we end up here with the number of days. So this is how long the streak lasted. The minimum day, so this is the day it started, and then the max day. So we can see if we go back to, well, I deleted that. Let's do that real quick again. Select start from groups. So if we run this, we see that we have a 3-day streak here from the 6th through the 8th, and then we have a 2-day streak here from the 3rd to the 4th. So now if we delete this, so now we see the same thing. So we have a 3-day streak from the 6th to the 8th, and then we have a 2-day streak from the 3rd to the 4th. So I hope that makes sense. Again, I'll put the blog post in the description, and there's obviously a lot of explanation in there too. And so that's how I'm going to calculate, going back to this, that's how I'm going to calculate this best streak. So kind of putting this back into Ruby code, what I really want is I want to do this, and I want to ask for the streak for a user. So I want to call this function I'm calling streak for, pass in the user, and then give it the attribute. So that probably means we'll be like duplicating all the attributes like this, and getting this, and then probably like finding the max of all these things. Which there's probably a way we could do that purely inside of our SQL query. I think it might be running into limitations based on how we structured the setup. So for example, if a day had many records, then we could do better grouping in here probably. But I think this will be fine for what we're doing right now. Again, if it becomes a performance problem, then there's always optimization. So how we do this in Ruby is we're going to basically run a query outside of active record. So we're not using a model for this. And so let's kind of break this down. So the first thing we do is we get a connection. This is a connection to our database. Let's come back to this quoted column. And what I'm doing here is I'm creating this SQL string that we see over here. This app is Postico, by the way, if you're wondering what I'm using to run all this query stuff. It's very nice. You can view, your database or your structure and do all that kind of stuff too. I'll put a link to this below as well. So this SQL query, we're basically going to make this string, and I'm using what's called a here doc, which is started by this and then a modifier, and then you close it out with the same modifier at the end. So I'm just calling it SQL. And it lets you just build up this really big string without having to worry about dealing with new lines or anything like that. So here we have the query, same thing as last time. A couple changes we're making to it. Number one, here I've hard-coded user ID 4, and we obviously want this to be dynamic, so we want to pass this in. And here I've also hard-coded the mental attribute to true, and so we want that to be dynamic so we can pass 1 for each attribute. So to do the user ID, pretty easy. We set up this placeholder, and then after the query, if you come down here, we're going to sanitize the input, and then we're just going to pass in the user ID. So right here. I would like to be able to do that with our attribute, but I've looked a few times to find a better way to do this, but what I would like to be able to do is something like this. Type like field name and use the same modifier, like this user ID, but I just don't think that the way that this query is constructed in Rails, I don't think it works to do a dynamic name like this. So what I'm doing is I'm string interpolating. I'm just putting the column name directly into the query. And you have to be careful doing this because if this was user-generated input, someone could maliciously try to affect the input here. And it's called SQL injection, something you can look up. But if this was user input, then they could do something like, they could pass some kind of string like this, ID, and then, add some extra stuff here where 1 equals 1. And basically they can just hijack your query and start querying whatever they want. So they can add their own stuff in here, select start from users, and then basically query whatever they want out of your database. But so what I'm doing to bypass this is I'm making sure that I quote the column. So this is letting Rails protect us, so it doesn't allow them to bust out of the query basically, and it will quote the value. And so it basically puts it in a string, so it's not executing it in a dangerous way. So that's what this is, quoted column. We're just taking the attribute that we passed in, quoting it, and then putting it in here, doing the same thing as this, just with a little bit more work. And so coming down here, we're sanitizing our input. We're going to execute the query, which I think this needs to be connection actually, or maybe I don't need this connection. Maybe I don't need this. Anyway, so we're going to, so we're going to sanitize. We're going to actually execute it. And then if we get any results back, so if there are rows, I'm going to grab the first one, because if you go back to our query, we're ordering by one descending, so that's the first column. So we're ordering by the count, so we're getting the max streak first. So that's the row we want. So I'm just returning the attribute, which is the name, so I can keep track of it. The streak, which is the first value, so that's our count. When it starts and when it ends. So this would come back as mental. We have a streak of 3, started on the 6th, and it ended on the 8th, which is this row 2. And then if we don't have any rows, I'm just going to send back some blank values. So if we come over to our Rails console, and let's go ahead and call this method right here, best streak, which is just going to return that one value. Let's find our user, user.find4. So user equals, this underscore is a nice thing because it just references your last output. So there I queried the user, now I can just assign it. Let's just do aggregation service best streak for user. And our result is attribute mental, which we asked for. We have a streak of 3, starts on 9/6, goes to 9/8. Okay, so that is working how we expect it to. Now let's open our tests again. Let's write some tests for this, and then let's finish out finding the best streak just across everything, or just the best streak across all the attributes. Okay, so we're writing new tests, self.beststreak. Do the same thing we can do when there are records. So let's make a user. Let's grab these. So we have 3 records. We're going to call best streak. And so what we want here, the output that we want to receive is, what did I call this? I called this attribute. So we want to receive attribute, and then the name, and then the streak. So there's some fake numbers, so let's go calculate what that is. So let's open our records file. Okay, so what we want to figure out here is which ones continue across our 3 days. And so with this data, we might actually end up having a tie. So I'm gonna cheat here and just run this code that we're pretty sure works, just to see what our possible thing might be. And we got some type of test running error. Okay, we have a syntax error. Line 73. So it doesn't like how we did this. Unexpected comma after name. That looks like a hash, like a normal. You're not allowed to do that. Let's pull this out. Okay, I guess it doesn't like you to do a literal hash there. Interesting. Okay, so let's look at our result. Now that we put a bybug here, so we can just debug and get in there. Okay, so it's saying that our streak for mental, because we just did 1. That makes sense. Okay, well, let's just do some brute force calculation on this. So physical, we have 2 days. Mental, we have 1 day, so physical's still winning. Existential is 1, relational is 1, financial is 1, personal is 0, career is 0. Okay, so just from a quick eyeball, it looks like the physical streak is the best one. So it's the only 2 day, streak we have. So what we should be able to say is that physical should be here for a streak of 2. If we run this should fail. Oh, I guess we can put in the days as well. Might end up using that on the UI. So I'll say starting 2019-09 year 7. Ending, I guess it would start on the 6th, end on the 7th. Okay, let's run that again. Okay, so now we have a failing test. So now we can finish this. So to do this in a very dumb way, I like to do it the dumb way and then fix it when it becomes a problem. Just go ahead and list out all these attributes. Okay, so we have all these values. Not doing anything with them yet. And how about we just store these in a map or a hash? So let's just grab the attribute. So these are our results. So what we want to do is we want to find, just go to Ruby hash, and let's look up, so we want the max value. So instead of using hash, maybe we just need the pure enumerable module. Okay, so max by turns the object in enum that gives the maximum value from the given block. Okay, so I was trying to figure out how to find the key as well after that, but it doesn't matter because we're returning the attribute here as well. So really we don't need these mapped. What we can do is just basically put them in an array. And so then the array, what we can do is call max by. And so we can basically check result of streak. And so this would be the best streak. So we're just going to do all the attributes and then find the top one. Okay, and so that works. Whoops. Okay, so that works in our test. Let's go ahead and do the no records test, just to be consistent. Which user? So that's no at records. No at records.com. We should assert that they have 0. And what do we expect data-wise? Expect the attribute to come back with 0 and then no dates. So run that. Passes, run the whole file. Passes as well. Okay, cool. So now that we have that, let's put that on our dashboard. Let's go back to split screen. So here's our app, beautiful app. Let's go to the dashboard. So what we want is we want our best streak and then which attribute that was. So again, just making it super ugly but functional. Let's do best streak. Let's open the dashboard controller and get this data. So I'm going to say at best streak. I'm going to call the service best streak for our user. And so we're going to say best streak. And then attribute. Okay, so for this user, we have a best streak of 3 for mental. So let's look at our seed data. Oh, so we did this randomly. So let's try and just verify this in the console real quick. So we have our user. Let's look at their records. Okay, so that's going to be kind of annoying to do. Just go back to PostGo app and let's look at the records like this. Well, actually, so we already know this from our query. Yeah, because this is what our query is doing. It's saying that we have a consecutive best streak on mental from 6 to 8. So let's go to our records. So far, I only have user ID 4 records in here. So if we look at 6 to 8, we will see that we have 3 trues in our mental column over here in this second column. It'd be nice to be able to select just a cell, but I don't know that I can. Okay, so let's go ahead and commit what we've done. Okay, so we've added our best streak, added some tests, added it to the dashboard. And I've got this Ruby file that I changed the version on. Okay, so add best streak to dashboard page. Push that up. Okay, so I think I'm going to stop it here, and I'll keep these videos a little shorter, a little more digestible. Next time, I think I want to get into this consistency stuff. So what are you consistent at? What are you not? Then after that, we'll do this little quote bit right here. And then I think at that point, we're ready to start styling, which would be nice because this is ugly. Okay, thanks for watching. See you in the next one.